Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Uh,
Uh,
I'm Theo Black,
I'm Sarah Black.
and we are finishing off Marilyn Monroe. And as you know, Jill pointed this out, and I hadn't really thought about this, but these are releasing kind of a week late, so this will actually be the first podcast in December. We should think about that, but not to worry about that now. We're
Yes.
finishing off Marilyn Monroe, which means we're doing these in chronological order. So, some like it hot.
Right. And I think something that's worth noting is that she did a lot of other movies. And I'm kind of curious about her other movies, despite the failure that was Monkey Business, which is one of the ones that's like kind of not on the list for her.
Yeah.
Um, it's kind of interesting how few movies she really is famous for in some ways, but that's the way a lot of you do a lot of movies, only so many of them are really good and a lot
Yeah.
of them are just fine. So
Yeah.
versus, I mean, you think of like Tom Hanks, he's been in so many movies and so many of them are famous.
Yeah.
I don't know about any contemporaries of Marilyn Monroe. I don't know Judy Garland. I don't know.
She had a long career, somewhat
Yeah, I mean,
troubled
part of
career,
it's
but
Marilyn Monroe's career wasn't that long. She was 36 when she died. So,
yeah.
anyway, some like it hot,
Some like it hot. So we had both seen this.
some don't. It's
Some don't, some do. Uh we had both seen this. This is I think the only movie on the list we had both no, Gentlemen Prefer Blonde. Anyways, we had both seen this before. I hadn't seen it for a long time. I'd seen it like when I was a young teenager maybe.
hmm
And when was the last time you saw it before this?
Probably I was late teens, early 20s. So it's been a while.
Probably it was the same time for both of us that
Yeah.
we saw it. And I was kind of like, I know that everybody, I know that it's a really famous movie. I don't know how many people love it or not. I mean, it's definitely at the time it was very popular, or I don't know if at the time it was popular, but it did eventually become very popular, and it is a very noteworthy movie. And it's Billy Wilder, and he, it's one of the movies that gets referenced when they talk about his filmography of great films.
Right. He's the director that did Sunset Boulevard and The Apartment, and either of those I would much rather watch than Some Like It Hot, which is not terrible. But hey, real quickly, spoilers. We're going to talk about
Yes.
everything. We're going to spoil anything we talk about. So if you hear a movie title come up and you don't want to know how it ends, you may want to be cautious.
Yes, we are pretty likely to spoil it. So the synopsis for this is interesting, and I'm going to take this one because I want you to do the Misfits, and I don't want to do that. So
Okay.
I'm going to do this instead. I'm taking the DVD for myself, as it were, if we're copying Best of the Worst. Uh, so our two leads, Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon, are a saxophone player and a cello player. Is that what he
I think
plays?
so. Something like that.
It's a string instrument. I think it's a cello. Uh, and they're playing at I guess what would they be called, a speakeasy? I don't know. It's prohibition, so they're playing at a bar that isn't a bar. It's in the back room of a funeral
Mm-hmm.
parlor, and it gets raided, and so they then have to find a way to get themselves money. And in the process of doing this, they try to borrow someone's car, except they're in the parking garage where the St. Valentine's Day Massacre happens, which is a real
It's not.
thing.
It's not quite the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, but it is
It is
heavily
heavily,
based on the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, which occurred in Chicago, 1929, February
yes,
14th.
yes. Now this now Some Like It Hot is from 1959, but the movie takes place in 1929.
Yes.
And so they're there when it happens, and so they then run. They manage to escape before being murdered, and they are complaining earlier in the movie. They're complaining about all these girl bands and whatever, and so they decide to dress in drag, I guess is the words. They wear dresses and they pose as women, and then they are a part of this band, and this band winds up in Florida, and Marilyn Monroe is there, and it's kind of rom-com-ish until the crime elements show back up at the end of the movie. And that was a pretty poor synopsis, but also I think that I did okay considering how little story and plot there actually
There's
is in
not
this
much
movie.
plot to this movie. The crime forces them to go on the run, cross dressing, But once they join the female band, there is no danger or threat from the crime until the very, very end of the
It
film.
essentially changes into a rom-com at that point.
San Diego plays Florida in this film. It is the Del Coronado, which is a very famous old hotel down in San Diego, California. And it is standing in for Florida. It does okay. I mean, I think it could have tried harder, but it's fine. Yeah, this movie isn't bad, but I someone who likes it more needs to explain
Yeah, like
its
it
staying
shows.
power to me, because I mean, the good stuff is I don't feel like women were made fun of. There's some
Mostly, yeah.
subversive bits. Their acting is good. A
I
lot
can
of the plot
understand.
is nonsense. Sorry, what were you saying?
I can understand that it's funny to many people. I
I
don't personally find it that funny, but whatever.
I think I'm really coming to understand why struggle so much with romantic comedies, because usually they're not romantic. Like, to
Right.
me, this movie it's called a black and white romantic comedy by Wikipedia, and it's like I feel like there needs to be a distinction between like comedies with romantic elements and because so Tony Curtis um decides he wants to be with Marilyn Monroe for reasons we never really understand or see. And he does a Cary Grant impersonation, as far as I can tell. Then it's
Yeah.
fine to fool her into loving him. And it's there's no real emotion to it. Like, it's all comedy. It's all playing with the fact that she's so dumb that she'll fall for him. I mean, she literally has to say how dumb she is 3 or 4 times in the movie. They have her character say that I am dumb. Like, she doesn't literally say I am dumb, but she says, I guess I'm not very bright, or something like that. Like, she says it more than once.
So
I
yeah,
personally was more drawn to the romance between Jack Lemmon and that older rich guy. Like, there was something kind of charming about what was going on there.
yes.
It took up way less screen time
Joe E.
than
Brown playing Osgood Feeling, and
Oscar. That's right. She called him Oscar.
right, but it was
I mean, he
Osgood.
called him Oscar.
Right. Okay, so there's here's a we're gonna shoot to the side and then back to the movie. So
Okay.
in the Lego Movie 2,
Okay.
Chris Pratt, not famously, but for people who saw it and who are aware of this kind of thing, was doing a version of Kurt Russell in the movie.
Right.
As far as most people know, Chris Pratt and Kurt Russell are friends and they enjoy each other's company and all
Right.
that, which is great. I like them as actors. Chris Pratt
Yeah.
is religious in a way that I don't understand, but that's, just a different life than
Is
me.
that part of this conversation?
No, but it's it's interesting to sort of think like, but Kurt Russell is, completely different. But they're friends, that's kind of cute. And so it's like, you see, then we shoot back to the side. And so Tony Curtis is doing a version of Cary Grant. And I'm like, is that, I assume it's intentional. It seemed intentional.
Yeah.
Are they friends? What's the story there? Cary Grant
Yeah.
had, a specific kind of lifestyle. He was not openly gay, but all reports say that he was. And, so I'm curious about some of that. And the reason I bring that up, because besides the fact that it's sort of interesting that like that's happening in this movie as like a
Right.
sidebar, also one of the reasons this movie is kind of famous is we watched Disclosure recently, and we also watched The Celluloid Closet, and Some Like It Hot comes up in both of those movies because there are not that many movies where men are dressing in drag, for one. And while that's not the same as being trans,
Right.
it's at least with somewhere in the same sphere of LGBTQIA stuff. And it is often referenced, it seems to be referenced in stuff concerning that, concerning the history of LGBTQIA cinema.
Right.
And for that same token, at the very end, Jack Lemmon is, like, well, the reason we can't marry is I'm a man. And Osgood's response to that is, well, no one's perfect,
Right.
which is a very sort of forward, like open sexuality kind of thing that I feel like you got there. And really, I mean, this is 1959. We're not in the 30s or 40s, but still, it's not like you get that in movies very much.
Right.
So that's a
well,
part of
the other interesting thing you're not mentioning that I only am now remembering because I glanced at the Wikipedia is that Tony Curtis playing Cary Grant is an issue in that he is frigid,
Right.
and Marilyn Monroe needs to like warm him up. So there's an odd sexuality thing going on there. As far as I can tell, the actual Tony Curtis character, Joe, I think,
Yeah.
Joe Josephine,
Yeah.
is not frigid. So he's just doing this to get Marilyn Monroe to like cuddle up to him or something. But it's
Yeah.
interesting that he's playing a Cary Grant knockoff who's not attracted to women or men. If
Right.
he's frigid, he's not attracted to anyone. Frigid isn't an old term. I'm sure it's not kosher, but
Right. I know
he
what you're
does
saying.
get cured of it too. So clearly he's not like actually asexual or anything or playing it. I mean, it's we're getting
Yeah,
in the weeds here, but yeah, no, that makes this movie more interesting than it felt like watching it.
Yeah, see, then that's where I kind of like have to like look at this movie and be like, well, it occupies an important place in history for a number of
Yeah.
reasons. Marilyn Monroe, the reasons we just mentioned.
Yeah.
I mean, Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis were both famous actors. I forgot, but Edward G. Robinson, who is in a number of noirs I like, is the gangster who kills Spats Colombo. And I didn't realize it because he is rather skinny and he ends up being a bit larger in his later roles.
Yeah.
He must have also been very young in this, or at least, well, I guess not very young.
No,
Or
Edward G. Robinson. This is Edward G. Robinson Jr.
Oh, so this must be maybe this is the son?
Yeah, Edward G. Robinson is much older. He was working since he was born in 1893. So this is his son.
Oh yeah, interesting. So yeah, I guess this must have been his son. Anyways, which I find interesting because I like Edward G. Robinson.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there's kind of, and then on top of that, it's a black and white movie in 1959, and we were still doing black and white in the 50s, but we were moving away from it. I think someone said, was it you or I don't know where I heard this, but it was on You Must Remember This. This was like the most expensive black and white movie ever made. And that more or less doomed it to not make as much money because at this point people are more interested in Technicolor movies like Gigi or something, which I think came out a year before this, and yes, Lily, which came out like 7 years before this. Yeah. Anyways, so and we should say, we finally caught up and watched the third episode of the You Must Remember This trilogy of episodes about Marilyn Monroe, and I re-listened to the second one because I wanted to remember some of the stuff from it. And Marilyn herself thought this was the dumbest blonde she ever played, and it's just, and like you say,
she's not wrong. She's got less depth. So this is her with Billy Wilder as a director again, and I would say she actually had slightly more depth in 7 Year Itch, because there was this implication in 7 Year Itch that she kind of understood the wife's point of view of this crazy man who keeps deluding himself that she wants to sleep with him in 7 Year Itch. Like, so there was something going on here. She is just there to react to things in Some Like It Hot, and react stupidly to give kind of Tony Curtis things to do. It's really, she's sexy, she's vulnerable, she's appealing, your eyes go straight to her, but not much is going on. She is sexy tabula rasa. Yeah, like there's not much.
There's nothing there really. She gets one scene where she just, she gets to monologue and sort of talk about like making bad choices and all these saxophone players she's been with and kind of being a bit of a mess. And she gets to, play her ukulele, which it doesn't look like she actually knew how to play. But then again, nobody looked like they knew what they were doing. Maybe some of the other characters, and she gets to sing. And so, we get some song and dance from her, and she's good at the comedy. And, she does the whole, when they're on the...
Sorry, keep going.
When they're on the yacht and we've got our frigid Cary Grant and she's, kissing him and all that, I understand how that could be funny. But this isn't like her at her best. Like that would be Gentlemen Prefer Blonde for me, of what I've seen. I think that or Harry to Marry a Millionaire are probably her best comedic performances.
Right.
And so I shrug. I'm shrugging. I'm sort of.
I prefer her performance in Bus Stop over this. Like she's got
more to do in Bus Stop.
Yeah.
Which is bizarre.
something I was going to mention, maybe more with the Misfits, but I think it goes here. Is it also besides just the fact that she was in a limited number of movies that really matter. Um, sorry, other movies. It's just that still get talked about. That's a better way of putting it.
Right.
She's never. It feels like she's never really a starring role. But when I think about that, I think that's just women in Hollywood at the time. You know, you were usually playing against a man. Like I think about like or other women, like How to Marry a Millionaire, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. It's her and Jane Russell. It's her and Lauren Bacall and Betty Grable. It's her and Joseph Cotton and Max Showalter and that Jean Peters. I'm sorry, I can't remember her name. In Niagara, like she's never. But that makes me think of how rare it was. Like I think of the Rita Hayworth movies I've seen, and she's with Gene Kelly, or she's with Fred Astaire, she's with these other and I was talking about wanting to see Marilyn Monroe kind of up with better men, and I think some of her better movies, the men are more interesting, or the women. I like her and Jane Russell and Gentlemen for Blondes, but it makes me think about Betty Davis and how hard she fought to get certain roles, and like how much All About Eve must have just been like, because that like she is the star of that movie.
Well,
I mean, and
yeah.
then you think about like, oh, I don't know, Wizard of Oz. Like, there's Judy Garland is definitely the star of that movie, but it just makes you think about how rare that was. Like, it doesn't feel like she commanded an entire movie on her own
It's
at
weird
any
because she
point.
had all this power, right? At one
Yeah,
point, she was the biggest star in Hollywood, and Karina Longworth talks about that and how she worked to get like something like Bus Stop as one of the films she was
right.
doing made. She was, I guess, she was a producer on it, or her
Yes.
company was,
Yeah.
and it's like there are plenty of movies from the 30s and 40s and 50s where women are the stars, but it's plenty is the word I'm using, but it's like they are you get those movies, but they're not really as many as you think they are. And even in those movies, it really depends. Like,
Yeah.
you know, it's How to
I
Marry a
mean,
Millionaire and Gentlemen Prefer Blonde feels somewhat unique. Like you don't
hmm
like I watched Working Girls yesterday.
hmm
And it's Dorothy Arzner and it's 1931, I think, and it's a movie about women. And
hmm
there are male characters and they aren't like empty. There's stuff going on there. But
hmm
like, I just like watching Working Girls, I'm like, it's really there aren't as many of these. Like you get a rom-com, but in the rom-com, the woman is never as well written as the man, like almost
yeah,
ever. Like it's that thing where it's like maybe if like they're probably the majority of movies are, male female leads of some kind, maybe male leads. I'm not
right.
sure. But the time when you do get male women movies, in terms of traditional, male women here, we're not talking, this is before the idea of,
This is
open gender.
right.
When you get male women, the women characters are always underwritten. Not always. I shouldn't say
Yeah.
always. They're often underwritten. So it's like it's kind of frustrating in a way because like you see some like It Hot and it's this movie and Marilyn Monroe's in it and it's really a Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis movie,
Yeah.
it's
Totally. That's what I was.
yeah.
And they
So I
did
don't know.
good. I mean, I don't feel like they're making fun of women. In fact, they several times comment on how hard it is to be a woman. One of my favorite scenes from that would be the one where the Jack Lemmon character on the train is like trying to kind of have this a little bit of a tete-a-tete. I don't know what I want to call it, and it just he gets overwhelmed by how wild and bawdy the women are. Basically, like they
Yeah.
create this whole big party,
Yeah.
and he it's not necessarily that he thinks women are all gentle little virginal angels. It's just he didn't expect it to be this overwhelming. Like
Yeah.
he
There's
thought he
a
could kind of like have this little little secret party, and instead they're the ones that keep inviting each other, and they turn a hot water bottle into a cocktail shaker, and they're crammed into his he has it's the compartment beds in a train. They're all crammed into the top
yeah.
one, while underneath Tony Curtis's character, who's told Jack Lemmon to be quiet and careful, is like trying to sleep.
Yeah, it's a duck soup, I think it's duck soup or no, it's a Night at the Opera. It's that boat scene,
I
it's
think it's
that
I haven't seen Night of the Opera, but I've seen Duck Soup, so I think it's Night of the Opera that
Night
you're
at the
talking about.
Opera. Yeah, it's that kind of scene, and we'll talk about this a little when we get to John Huston with the Misfits. But Billy Wilder was a man who I think had some some knowledge of things that might have been wrong in his day with society, or maybe not
Mhm.
wrong, but maybe things that could be improved upon.
Right.
And Sunset Boulevard is one of my favorite movies. And I would like to think that Norma Desmond is a really well written character.
Mhm.
And Marilyn Monroe doesn't get the same treatment. And
Right.
men are imperfect. And unfortunately, a lot of movies are made by men. Women are also imperfect, but men are imperfect in a way where the women usually get short shrift or whatever
Yeah.
it's called.
Well,
And so,
everyone has biases, but when, your majority creators are men, those are the biases you're gonna get.
right, that was a much more eloquent way of saying what I was trying to say. And but what I'm trying to say is Billy Wilder, I think, actually had some clue as to what might have been
Right.
wrong with the way we looked at women and how we treated women in society and culture.
Right. It's
Because,
possible to care about women and believe in women and still dismiss Marilyn Monroe because
yes,
she's not the right kind of woman. Yes, no, Billy Wilder is I mean, I think have you seen The Apartment?
no,
I haven't seen it in a while, so I'm going off of memory, but I think there's a lot of empathy for the Shirley MacLaine character in that movie who is kind of being used by the men around her. I don't know why. I mean, and The Apartment is definitely darker than Some
yeah.
Like It Hot. Like it's Some Like It Hot is pretty light. And again, we never know how much the studios interfered. I know
Oh, yeah.
Billy
Who knows?
Wilder mentioned in something about 7 Year Itch that like they should have just slept together or something. Like
Yeah,
you're hamstrung. An artist is always hamstrung by many things.
yeah, totally.
Some of them societal, some of them just just art is
Yeah.
you know. So
Yeah, and it's that thing where Some Like It Hot is again not making fun of the women characters, and indeed the sympathy seems to lie with the women characters in multiple scenes, which is where I'm like, I think Billy Wilder had a clue what was going on, but Marilyn Monroe's character is just so empty.
yeah,
So it's funny because we after last week's episode we mentioned talking about specifics, right? We want to make sure we
right.
talk about specifics, and I'm like trying to think of specifics about Marilyn Monroe's character where to like really make this point solid. And it's like I don't know, if you just watch the movie, like every scene she's in, she's kind of just there for Tony Curtis to bounce off of, and you
Yeah.
know he do his phony
I think
accent,
about
and
the scene where she goes to the yacht with him and just makes a bunch of stupid comments about a fish
yeah,
trophy. I mean, and
yeah.
it's
What kind
it's
of fish
so
is that?
it's so inane. It's so,
Yeah.
but it doesn't reveal anything about her character. Like you said, we already talked about the one character moment where she's bad with men, but like that's so empty. There's nothing more to
Right,
it.
and in Gentlemen Prefer Blonde, she has some really great lines. I think that's
Yeah.
Howard Hawks, right? Is
Yes.
Gentlemen Prefer Blondes?
Yeah.
And like she has some really great lines. Where there was,
She's
she
shown
is
to be
not as smart as,
savvy.
you
She's
know,
shown. Yeah.
it's just as easy to fall in love with a rich man as a poor man, and
Yeah.
there's all that kind of stuff in that movie. And it's again, I like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes more than this movie.
No,
It's
I agree. I would actually say my top three Marilyn Monroe, although maybe I should save this for the Misfits, but my top three include Gentlemen Prefer Blondes.
I would, I think so too. I think
Yeah.
so too.
Yeah.
Anyways, I think I've kind of exhausted all my
I've said
thoughts.
more about this than I thought I was going to because there's really not that much for me in this movie. It's fine. I don't think you shouldn't see it if you want to see it. I don't think you should see it if you don't want to see it. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, no, this is a
I
movie.
see
This
it
is
see
famous
it
for
for
reasons.
Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon and
They're
to be a
good.
Marilyn Monroe completist. But there's
Yeah, it's an important movie in Hollywood history. Like, there's a lot of reasons to watch it. It's just, it's kind of, it's a little bit of a letdown having seen it younger and sort of enjoyed it, and
right.
being a little older now and being like, it's a letdown when there's this famous movie that a lot of people talk about and it just isn't that good to
Yeah.
you. I didn't enjoy
Yeah.
it that much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.